17 missed calls from an unknown number appeared on Emily Carter's phone before the sun had fully risen, and within just a few seconds, the peaceful life she had spent nearly 20 years building began to crack. She stood in her small kitchen in Seattle, still holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold without her noticing, the soft morning light slipping through the window just like any other day, quiet and gentle, but inside her, nothing was calm. Some memories never truly disappear. They do not need noise. They only need the smallest signal to come back and pull you straight into the place you tried so hard to forget. Emily did not need to open the voicemail to know who was calling. A part of her already knew, not through logic, but through that cold sensation running down her spine. Exactly like the feeling she had when she was 13, standing alone in a vast train station, realizing no one was coming back for her. In the living room, Noah was getting ready for work. He noticed immediately how pale her face had become, how her eyes were fixed on the phone as if it were holding something she was not ready to face. He asked softly what was wrong, but Emily did not answer right away. She set the cup of coffee down slowly, as if every movement had suddenly become heavier. She did not want to say it out loud, because saying it would mean admitting that the past still had power over her, and that was a mistake she had spent years trying to correct. The Emily Carter of today was a woman most people would describe as strong. She had her own design studio, steady clients, a life many would call successful. She knew how to create spaces for others, how to turn emptiness into something meaningful. But what almost no one knew was that throughout her entire childhood she had never had a place that truly felt safe. Her phone lit up again with a new message. Emily opened it. There was only one short line. "It's Lily. Can you call me back?" That name made everything inside her pause. Lily, her younger sister, the little girl who used to follow her through the long hallways of their old house, wearing mismatched socks, always looking as if she was trying to understand why the air in that house always felt so tense. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, she was no longer in her kitchen in Seattle. In her mind she was somewhere else, a different city, a day where even the light felt cold like metal. She was 13, standing in the middle of South Station, announcements echoing around her, people moving like a current, and she stood there, small and still, as if even one step could make everything worse. She had once believed it was just another lesson, just like all the others, but it was not. That was the day she understood something no child should ever have to learn, that some people do not just abandon you, they want to see you panic. Noah stepped closer and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. The touch was light, but enough to pull her back to the present. He told her she did not have to face this alone. Emily looked at him. The panic in her eyes was gone, replaced by something clearer, colder. She had spent 20 years rebuilding herself from a child who had been told she was weak, too sensitive, never good enough. They thought she would break. They thought she would come back, but they did not know one thing. She was not that girl anymore. She was the one who survived, and this time, if the past had come back, it was not to destroy her, it was to end everything on her terms. The Carter family looked so perfect that people felt reassured just by seeing them from the outside. Their house sat in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Boston, with a white-painted fence, a lawn trimmed neatly every weekend, and backyard barbecues where laughter was just loud enough for others to hear, just natural enough that no one questioned it. Emily's father was a respected lawyer. Her mother, a teacher admired by parents. They knew exactly what to say, exactly how to present themselves as the kind of family society approved of. And because of that, no one ever saw what happened behind that door. Inside, everything followed one simple rule. Love was not something you were given. It was something you had to earn. Emily learned that very early. When she was 8, just because she forgot to bring her homework home, her mother made her stand outside on the porch for an entire rainy afternoon, not as punishment, but to remember what failure feels like, as she called it. Emily still remembered the cold seeping through every layer of clothing, the way rainwater ran down her neck, cold enough to make her shiver uncontrollably. But what hurt more was not the cold. It was seeing her father standing inside, looking through the glass door, sipping coffee and smiling as if he were watching a form of entertainment. No one opened the door, no one asked if she was okay. And that was not the only time. When Emily was 10, during a dinner with guests, her mother suddenly asked her to stand up and present her dreams in front of everyone. Emily hesitated, her voice small, her words uneven, and that was enough. Her mother laughed, turned to the guests, and said the girl was always this lacking in confidence, that if she did not fix it, she would never amount to anything. Everyone laughed along. Emily forced a smile, but inside, something began to shrink. Little by little, she learned to observe before speaking, to read her parents' moods through their eyes, their tone, their silence. She learned how to shape herself into a version that was just good enough to avoid attention, because in that house, being noticed was never a good thing. Everything could become a lesson. A small mistake could turn into an experiment. A normal emotion could become a reason to be corrected. Her parents called it preparation for the real world. But Emily did not learn strength. She learned fear. She learned that if she stayed quiet long enough, if she became perfect enough, maybe she would not be chosen next. The only thing that made her feel like she still existed was drawing. She drew wherever she could, in the margins of her notebooks, on the backs of scrap paper, on small pieces she hid inside her drawer. She drew rooms with locked doors, roads where no one was chasing her, people standing alone but unafraid. At the time, she did not know why she drew those things, but looking back now, it was clear. It was how she created a place to escape, a place no one could control, a place where she did not have to prove she deserved peace. But in her parents' eyes, none of that was ever enough. Emily could try, and it would never be enough. She could stay silent, and it would never be the right kind of silence. She could endure, and still be expected to endure more. And the most dangerous part was that they did not believe they were doing anything wrong. They believed they were teaching her. They believed the world outside was harsher, and they were only preparing her for it. But they did not understand one thing. The world was not what Emily feared. Her home was. And when a child begins to feel safer alone than with their own family, it is no longer a home. It becomes a place they will eventually find a way to leave, no matter what it costs. It all began with a mistake so small that most families would have forgotten it within days. Emily had not done well on a presentation at school, not because she was lazy, not because she had not tried, but because she stood in front of the class, looked out at dozens of eyes, and her mind went completely blank. She spoke slowly, hesitated, left longer pauses than usual, and that was enough. That night, dinner was unusually quiet. There was no shouting, no outburst of anger, just soft questions that felt far too soft. "Do you think you did well?" her mother asked calmly. Emily did not answer right away. She knew that any answer could turn into a mistake. Her father leaned back in his chair, watching her as if he were waiting for something more interesting than an answer. Finally, Emily spoke quietly. "I don't think it was good enough." Her mother nodded, a faint smile appearing. "That's right, not good enough." There was no anger in her voice, but it weighed more than any raised voice ever could. That night, Emily lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to guess what the next lesson would be. The next morning, everything changed. Her mother made breakfast. Her father turned on music in the kitchen. The atmosphere was so light that it made Emily more uneasy than being yelled at. They said they were taking her into the city. Just a small trip, the three of them. Emily did not fully believe it, but a part of her still wanted to think that maybe this time things would be different. The car pulled away from their familiar neighborhood. The road into Boston felt longer than usual. Her father drove with one hand tapping along to the music. Her mother turned around several times, asking questions Emily did not know how to answer. "Do you think you're ready for the real world? Do you think life will wait for you to be ready?" Every question felt like a trap. Emily answered briefly, carefully, but the more careful she was, the more amused they seemed. When the car stopped in front of South Station, the crowd was already thick. Suitcases rolled across the floor, announcements echoed overhead, the space so vast that Emily felt smaller just standing there. They walked inside. passing rows of seats, ticket counters, streams of people moving quickly in every direction. Then her mother stopped. "Wait here," she said, pointing to a large pillar near the entrance. "We're going to park the car and come back. 15 minutes. Emily nodded. She was used to following instructions. She stood there, hands clasped together, watching them turn and walk away. 15 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. At first, Emily reassured herself. Maybe the parking lot was full. Maybe they got delayed. Maybe they would be back any moment. An hour passed. No one came back. No one called her name. There was no sign that they even remembered she was standing there. She started to move, just a few steps, then returned to the same spot, as if leaving would somehow be a mistake. 2 hours passed. The feeling in her chest began to change. It was no longer worry. It was something deeper, heavier, like the ground beneath her was slowly disappearing. Then she saw the car. Through the large glass windows, her family's car moved slowly along the curb outside. Her heart slammed against her chest. Her body reacted before she could think. She ran toward the door, waving both hands. They came back. For a split second, she truly believed they had come back. Her father sat behind the wheel, her mother in the passenger seat. Both of them looked straight at her. And then they smiled. Not with relief. Not like people who had found their child. It was the smile of people watching something unfold exactly the way they expected. Her mother rolled down the window. The wind carried the noise of the city inside. She spoke loud enough for Emily to hear. "Let's see if you can find your way home." Her father lifted his hand in a gesture, as if he had just won a bet. The car moved forward, slowly, then disappeared into traffic. Emily stood still. She did not run after them. She did not scream. She did not cry. Not because she did not want to, but because in that moment, something inside her broke. There was no more doubt, no more hope, no more reason to wait. This was not a lesson. This was a choice. And for the first time in her life, Emily understood a simple, brutal truth. They did not forget her. They chose to leave her behind. Emily could not remember exactly how long she had been standing there. Time inside the station did not move the way it normally did. It stretched, slowed down, then suddenly jumped forward as if someone else was controlling it from a distance. At first, she stayed close to the pillar where her mother had told her to wait, her hands tightly clasped together, her eyes fixed on the entrance as if she just stayed patient a little longer, they would come back. But they did not. People passed by her again and again, unfamiliar faces, rushed conversations, announcements echoing at regular intervals. No one stopped. No one asked. No one knew that a child was standing there with no way to get home. After a while, Emily started to move. Her first steps were slow, almost hesitant, as if she were breaking an invisible rule. She stepped away from her spot, then returned, took a few more steps, then went back again, like she was trapped in a circle with no exit. In her mind, a familiar voice kept repeating, "If you do something wrong, everything will get worse." She did not dare to go too far. She did not dare to ask anyone for help. She did not dare to cry for too long, because for years she had been taught that her emotions were something to hide. But her body would not listen. The pressure in her chest grew heavier. Her breathing became shallow. Her hands began to shake. She sat down on a nearby bench, then stood up again, then walked, with no destination, only panic slowly spreading through her. A normal child would have run to find an adult, would have asked for help, would have said they were lost. But Emily did not. Because the first adults in her life had taught her that asking for help was a sign of weakness, and weakness would be punished. It was the most dangerous lesson they had ever taught her. She tried to remember her home address, but her mind was filled with scattered fragments. She had never needed to go anywhere on her own. Everything in her life had always been controlled. Now, when she needed to find her way back, she had nothing. Not enough money to go far. No phone. No one to call. No place to return to. At some point, the waiting disappeared. Not because she had lost hope, but because her body no longer had the energy to keep hoping. She no longer stood near the entrance, no longer looked outside. She moved on instinct, avoiding crowded areas, drifting toward quieter corners with less light, as if her survival instinct was trying to keep her safe in a way she could not fully understand. And that was when someone began to notice. Daniel Brooks had worked at the station for over 20 years. He was used to seeing unfamiliar faces, people coming and going, stories that were never told. But this girl was different. He had seen her pass the same area multiple times, moving the same way, with the same look in her eyes. Not the look of someone waiting, but the look of someone who did not know what to do next. He approached her slowly, carefully, without making any sudden movement that might scare her. "Are you waiting for someone?" he asked. Emily reacted immediately. "I'm fine," she said quickly. Too quickly. It was a reflex she had practiced too many times. Daniel did not press. He did not question her. He simply nodded, as if accepting her answer. But he did not walk away. "Have you eaten anything?" he asked. That question broke everything. Not because it was complicated, but because it was the first question all day that did not carry judgment. Emily opened her mouth to answer, but no sound came out. Her throat tightened, her eyes burned, and then there was no way to hold it back anymore. She broke down. Not the quiet kind of crying she had learned to hide, but a complete collapse. Everything she had been holding in for hours, for years, came pouring out at once. Daniel did not tell her to calm down. He did not tell her to stop. He simply stood there, close enough so she would not feel alone, but not too close to make her panic. After a while, when her crying began to settle, he spoke slowly. "You're okay, you're safe." It was the first time that day Emily heard those words. Safe. And strangely, for the first time, she began to believe it might actually be true. Not because the place had changed, but because for the first time, an adult was not trying to hurt her. The days that followed were unlike anything Emily had ever experienced before. She did not go back home. There was no moment where her parents came to pick her up, no late apology, no explanation offered to soften what had happened. Instead, she found herself sitting in a small room with adults she had never met, listening as they spoke about her life as if it were a problem to be solved. The questions began. "What is your full name? Where do you live? What do your parents do? Do you feel safe at home?" That last question kept Emily silent the longest. She had never thought about it that way. Safety was not something she had ever considered. It was not a choice in her world. But when the woman sitting across from her repeated the question, her voice calm but firm, Emily realized she could not lie the way she always had. Not because she wanted to tell the truth, but because for the first time, someone actually wanted to know the answer. She shook her head, just slightly, but it was enough to change everything. The decision came faster than she expected. She would not be going home, at least not right away. There would be a temporary place, a temporary family, a temporary life. Everything was described as temporary. But deep inside, Emily felt that this was not just a pause. This was a turning point. The family she was brought to lived in a quieter neighborhood, farther from the center of the city. The house was not large, not perfect, not the kind of place people would stop to admire. But when the door opened, something felt different. The air was not tense. There was no sense that she needed to predict what would happen next. Rachel Reed stood at the door. She did not ask too many questions. She did not look at Emily like she was a problem to be fixed. She simply said, "Come in." It was a sentence Emily had heard thousands of times before, but this time, it carried no condition. Thomas Reed was in the kitchen. He looked up, gave a small nod, then returned to what he was doing. There was no scrutiny, no forced smile. Everything felt normal, and that normality left Emily unsure how to respond. Rachel asked what she would like to eat. Emily did not answer right away, not because she did not know, but because she was not used to being given a choice. Finally, Rachel said gently that if she was not sure, she could make some soup, something simple. Emily nodded, a small nod, But for the first time that day, she had made a decision without fearing judgment. Dinner was quiet. No one forced her to talk. No one asked her to explain what had happened. When Emily slowed down while eating, Rachel did not comment. When she set her spoon down halfway through, no one asked why. Everything was allowed to exist exactly as it was. That night, Emily lay in an unfamiliar room. The door was not locked. There were no footsteps stopping outside, no sense that she needed to brace herself for something unexpected, and yet, she could not sleep. Every small sound made her flinch: a door closing somewhere in the house, water moving through the pipes, the wind against the window. Her body was still waiting for something bad to happen, but it never did. The next morning, when she stepped out of the room, Rachel was already in the kitchen. She turned, gave a gentle smile, and said, "Good morning." Nothing more, no demand, no test, just a greeting. Emily stood there for a moment. She did not say anything, but in her mind, a thought began to form. Maybe the world was not what she had been taught. Maybe not every adult was trying to hurt her. And if that was true, then something else might also be true. That the problem had never been her. That all those years, she had not been weak. She had simply been a child placed in the wrong place. And for the first time, Emily began to understand something that would later change her entire life. Safety was not something you had to earn. It was something you deserved from the very beginning. 20 years later, Emily was no longer the girl standing alone in a cold, unfamiliar train station. She had become the woman people turned to when they wanted to build a space that truly belonged to them, someone who understood what it meant to lose a sense of safety, and more importantly, how to create it again from nothing. Seattle in the morning carried a quiet kind of calm, soft light, cool air that never felt harsh, and inside her apartment, Emily stood by the window looking down at the familiar street, where everything moved in steady patterns. No surprises, no chaos, a life she had taught herself to believe she deserved. But the phone on the table had already changed that. After Lily's message, nothing could return to what it had been. Emily did not reply right away. She did not call back. She did not open any other messages. Yet inside her, something had already begun to shift. Not the doors of memory, those had never truly closed, but the doors of choice. Noah sat across from her, quieter than usual. He did not ask more questions, did not push, but the look in his eyes was enough for Emily to understand. He was not waiting for an answer. He was waiting for her to decide where she would stand. Lily called again that afternoon. This time Emily answered. The voice on the other end was no longer the voice of the little girl she remembered. It was deeper, more tired, and there was something in it Emily recognized immediately. Truth. "Mom is very sick," Lily said, without hesitation. "Dad hasn't been working for a long time. Everything has changed." Emily said nothing. She just listened. Pieces of a past she thought had disappeared began to return, but in a completely different shape. The family once admired by the entire neighborhood was no longer seen the same way. Old stories, quiet rumors, things that had been buried for years were being spoken again. Not because anyone wanted justice, but because no one wanted to stay silent anymore. The stores had closed. Friends had disappeared. The same people who once laughed in their backyard now crossed the street to avoid them. The perfect image her parents had built over so many years had collapsed. Not loudly, but completely. "They want to see you," Lily continued, not because they understood, not because they wanted to apologize, but because they had no other choice. Emily closed her eyes. The first feeling that came was not anger, and it was not pain. It was clarity, cold and sharp. She had spent 20 years walking away. It had taken them 20 years to come back. Noah spoke for the first time since the call began. "You don't owe them anything," he said. Rachel called her later that night. Her voice was the same as always, calm and steady. "If you go, make sure it's because you want to, not because they need you." That sentence stayed with Emily for a long time. She sat alone in the living room after it got dark. No lights, no music, just the city's glow filtering through the window. She thought about the girl she used to be, the 13-year-old who stood in that station believing that being abandoned meant she was not worth loving. She thought about the years that followed, learning how to trust, learning how not to panic when someone said they would be back in 15 minutes. She thought about her home now, her life, everything she had built with her own hands. And then she understood something. Going back was not the same as returning. It was facing it. The next morning, Emily booked a flight. Not to save them. Not to fix anything, but to close a story that should have ended a long time ago. As the plane took off, she did not look down at the city below. She looked straight ahead, because this time, she was not the girl who had been left behind. She was the one who had found her own way. And this time, she was not going back to ask for a place to belong. She was going back to prove that she no longer needed one. If this story stayed with you, take a moment and ask yourself one question. Have you ever mistaken pain for love? Share your thoughts or your story in the comments. Your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear today. And if you believe that healing is possible, that walking away can be strength, not weakness, hit like, subscribe, and stay with this channel. Because sometimes, the most powerful stories are the ones that remind us we were never broken to begin with.